Well, thank you. It is great to be here to wrap up the week.
Yeah, and we are excited about getting to talk today about what do healthy relationships look like. Because it has been a heavy week, and we've talked a lot about what can go wrong. But we also want to give you a context of what are healthy relationships, what are sort of the markers of that, and then even to realize when a healthy relationship may be veering off into the areas of unhealthy. So we want to talk about climates, basically. Yeah. You know, we live in Southern California, beautiful climate, right? It's beautiful out, it's sunny, so much so that we can even plan major events for outside. So a couple of weeks from now, we're going to have graduation, and that's all planned outside. And Event Services is hoping that the weather cooperates with that because it's hard when it doesn't. People plan weddings outside. We had the Torrey Memorial Bible Conference outside for the first time this year. Usually the climate cooperates, but sometimes not. So we want to talk about climates. California has a pretty stable climate. It allows you to make plans, allows you to do a lot of things. But that's not true everywhere. Climates can vary quite a bit.
That's right, and they can actually change what happens. So this is our honeymoon. I had hair.
And we were rocking the acid wash jeans.
We were, but tell them what we're doing here.
We were in Fort Collins after we got married, and we decided to go, I decided we should go skydiving.
Noreen says to me, honey, let's take some of our wedding money and go skydiving. And guys, what am I supposed to say to my new bride at that point? No, honey, that frightens me, right? It's like...
But it was something I'd always wanted to do, so I saw this advertisement in the paper, and I thought it'd be fun to go out. It's a little local airport.
Something I'd always wanted to do is to live a long life with my spouse. It seemed like the two were conflicting at that moment.
But that is the actual plane that we jumped out of. It was a plane that didn't have a door, had no seats, because you just sat on the floor of the plane and you attached it was called static line, so you actually attach a cord to the floor of the plane, so when you jump out, it automatically deploys your chute, because they don't trust you as a first-time skydiver who's had 8 hours of training to know how to pull your chutes properly. But the Fort Collins climate is very different than the California
That's right.
climate.
So we trained all day. You have to train all day. What happens if your main chute, for some reason you can't brake, or some reason your lines are tangled? You have to be able to go to your auxiliary chute, and we practiced that all day. Well, at the end of the day, storm clouds came in, and the woman called the jump master, jump master, she said, you know what, we can't do it. It's unsafe. The weather will not cooperate. The climate is no longer safe for you to jump, so we'll refund your money, or tomorrow you can jump. So climates dictate what we can do outdoors, but they also can dictate what we do in relationships.
Right. So what we want to talk about this morning is what's a communication climate? So it says that it is an overarching sense of value and satisfaction individuals feel as they interact with each other and go about daily activities. So every relationship you have has a communication climate. It surrounds you. You can't escape it. It's with you everywhere you go. But it will vary from relationship to relationship. So you may have a sort of it's sunny and 75-degree type climate with your boyfriend currently, but you walk into your dorm room and it feels like it's freezing rain with your roommate. So those climates will vary based on the other person that you're in relationship with.
So when comm theorists talk about the health of a relationship, we say, well, what's the communication climate like? You have one with your entire family, of course, but then you also have one with each one of your parents and each one of your siblings. You have individual climates. So we generally say the health of a climate is the health of a relationship. Comm theorists have broken this down into 4 different areas. The very first one would be expectations. What are the expectations you have as you walk into a particular relationship with a particular person? Now, there's 2 different types of expectations. Obviously, there's spoken expectations, right? It's what Noreen and I, when we're going to start our marriage, we say, hey, this is what I expect, or this is how I envision our relationship's going to look like. That started when we were dating, absolutely moved into our marriage. But there's also these things called unspoken expectations.
They're more dangerous.
Yeah, more dangerous. I fully expect this to happen, and it's so obvious this should happen, I don't even need to communicate it. Right? So one time, now you need to know, I was a theater major. You were what major?
Business major.
Business major, very different, right? So one day, very different. Pre-law, pre-unemployment. Okay, so as I get home one day And Noreen says to me when I walk through the front door, she says,
Oh, yeah. Honey, the van won't start.
theater major. I looked at her, I said, bummer. But the expectation was...
Yeah, my expectation was that Tim would be the one that would take care of the car when it breaks down. And, that's what my dad did, so I assumed that he would know what to do with a van that wouldn't start.
So I walked out there.
I was wrong.
Yeah, I walked out there, pumped the hood, opened the hood, stood with my hands behind my back,
That's the problem.
just kind of rocked. Waited 20 minutes, walked back in. I said, maybe we can sue somebody. So why don't we talk about things that are general when it comes to expectations about all relationships? Oops.
Okay, so...
Here we go. Boom.
Okay.
Oh, no. Okay, I'm going to go back. Boom.
Having
There we go.
little clicker issues this morning. Yeah, so in a communication climate, a healthy communication climate, one thing that has been found across the board is a researcher named John Gottman, who is probably one of the premier researchers in the area of relationships. He said the thing that is true of a healthy relationship is that you will have a 5-to-1 ratio of positive interactions to negative interactions. And, sometimes we might think we're doing well if we're doing 1-to-1, 2-to-1, even 3-to-1. 3-to-1 sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But what he has found in all his study is that 5-to-1 is the minimum ratio, that it needs to be at least 5 positive. And I do want to say, in the context of this week, because we've talked about abuse and sexual violence, that one negative, that's not an abusive negative. In that context of 5-to-1,
right.
those are normal positive and normal negative. So that might just be a disagreement or a comment.
A snarky
snarky comment,
yeah.
a roll of the eyes. That's what's considered a negative. We're not talking about a cycle of abuse where there's an abusive situation and then they're nice to you for a while and then it gets abusive again. So when we talk about a healthy relationship, you want to have at least 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative.
And again, we settle and we allow this ratio to get messed up for a lot of different reasons. So some of you would say, yeah, in the dating relationship I'm in right now, I'd never say it's 5-to-1. I would say it's like maybe 1-to-1. I would say maybe even sometimes it's like the negative outweighs the positive. But the question is, why do we do that? Why do we allow ourselves to be in relationships where the ratio is completely whacked?
And that's what we want to say. In a relationship, abuse, you don't want to get used to it. It should never happen so often that you get used to it, that becomes the norm. And then the other thing that she says is, it's why getting put first takes some getting used to. That should be the normal standard in a relationship, that you value each other enough that you are willing to put the other first. That's a supremely biblical idea of putting others first, but not accepting that you get used to being treated poorly.
Yeah, and so some people say, well, hey, some attention is better than no attention. So even though I'm having the ratio is completely whacked, right? But I'm still getting attention from a person. And this has taken on cultural implications. We have seen that through pop culture, through movies, that now we're starting to say that violence can even be a normal part of our relationship. Take a look at these statistics. 20% of girls between ages of 14 to 18 reported being hit, slapped, shoved, or forced to have sex by a date, but stay in the relationship. 25% of women and 30% of men regard violence as a normal part of marriage. So it can get so twisted and our perspective can get so warped that we accept this negative ratio or an abusive ratio because at least I'm in a relationship of some kind. So we want to present a different view of that. Stephen Covey wrote a book a long time ago called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he said the most important habit was begin with the end in mind. So when we look at the scriptures, we go to Ephesians chapter 5, and in Ephesians chapter 5, you get a robust view of Christian marriage from the Apostle Paul. He speaks to both men and women, and he paints what he thinks marriage should look like. So if we were to survey this group, if national statistics would hold true, 90% of you would get married. And most of you would want to get married. Nothing wrong with being single, but most of you would want to get married. So let's begin with the end in mind and take a look at what a healthy biblical relationship looks like. And let's start with the husband. So Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. Wow. I am to be self-sacrificial towards Noreen. I'm to pursue her even in times that she doesn't pursue me or isn't responsive to my pursuit. Think of Romans chapter 1, right? Humanity's in a death spiral away from God, and yet Christ is still pursuing us. Husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. Wow. In other words, I'm attentive to my own body, exercise-wise, my own personal needs. Paul is saying, as attentive as you are to your body, be attentive to this woman who is now a one-flesh relationship with you. By the way, I also think there's social justice implications to this. In the New Testament times, you had nobody to protect you. You were incredibly vulnerable. So just as Paul is saying, you wouldn't abuse your own body. You literally wouldn't hurt yourself. Do not hurt this woman who is now one flesh with you. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, right? So you want to be in a relationship where men, we're nourishing and cherishing a woman, and ladies, you're receiving that, but there's a red flag that comes with all of this. And here's what the red flag we came up with. Nourishing or cherishing will never look like or feel like controlling or bullying. So I'm not forcing Noreen to respond to me. I'm not bullying her, laying a guilt trip on her to make her buy into my vision of the marriage or what I think we need to do as a couple or as a family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because some have used or misused Scripture to try to justify an abusive or an imbalanced relationship, we do want to address these couple of things. So a little bit later in Ephesians 5, it says, let the wife see to it that she respects her husband. So what might be some of the red flags with respect, or how sometimes respect gets twisted away from what its original meaning would be? So respect does not mean to idolize, to see no wrong, or to fear speaking your opinion. So respect doesn't mean that you put somebody up on a pedestal and think that they have no problems, no negative interaction. Any problem in the relationship, it must be you. That's not respect.
I finally had to say to Noreen, honey, you can't idolize me like this. I'm just
You're just
I'm
a man.
Just a man. It took her years to get, but I think we're here now.
We got there,
yeah. We got there, yeah.
We're good.
We're good.
But the other thing, seeing no wrong. It's frightening when we talk to women who cannot point out any negative qualities of somebody they're dating. Because everybody has got positive, and they've got strengths and they've got weaknesses. You need to be aware of both and to be able to articulate both.
What do we say during premarital counseling? We say to a couple, when we do premarital counseling, we say to this couple, give us 5 things you love.
3 things that concern you.
Yeah, 3 things that concern you. And you'll be amazed. Sometimes couples are like, yeah, there's nothing that can, one time I wanted a vanilla latte venti, and he got me a, okay, that doesn't even remotely count, okay? Yeah. But we have to be able to see it.
Right. And if, again, fear of speaking your opinion. In any relationship, you need to have a voice. And if there is fear that you cannot speak your opinion for whatever reason, that is a red flag. That is a warning of something you need to be moving out of. And then the other thing is that respect is not demanded. It is offered. Respect is something that we give to people. And if they're demanding it, that's a red flag. Respect is offered by the one. It is not demanded by the receiver.
Another aspect of a communication climate is what we call acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is letting the other person know that what he or she is saying is having an impact on you. All of us want to be in relationships where our perspectives are listened to and at least considered, right? Doesn't mean you have to agree with each other and everything, but at least acknowledge the weight of my perspective in a way that's really healthy. So one of the huge privileges we have at Biola is we get to teach a class on Christian relationships. We teach it Tuesdays. Anybody in the class? Christian relationships? Awesome. We don't give extra credit. Tuesdays we teach it. We teach it with Eric and Donna Tanis, and we teach it with Chris and Elisa Grace. And one time in front of the students, Noreen and I have a disagreement on a couple of different things, right? Academic things.
Couple of things.
And one of them was this woman named Jonalyn Fincher was arguing, is it possible to have opposite-sex friendships outside the marriage? Now, from a theoretical perspective, my answer is yes. I think that is possible. Noreen's answer is no. Well, we had that disagreement in front of students. It was respectful. We acknowledged each other's perspective. Wasn't it funny, the reaction from the students?
Yeah, they were surprised that we would still disagree even after having a conversation. Because even having a conversation or resolving conflict doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to come to agreement. It means you come to acknowledge each other's position and respect it.
And respectfully disagree.
Right.
So what's the red flag of this? The red flag is when you voice your opinion, you are met with silence, right? You get the silent treatment. Second, you're met with punishment of some kind. I withhold my affection towards you until you get in line and agree with my perspective, and then withdrawal. So acknowledgement in a warped communication climate is not sufficient. It's not sufficient that you just acknowledge my perspective. Agreement is forced. You're not allowed to have a differing opinion. And our marriage would look crazy if Noreen and I agreed on everything. Who was that one
It'd be
theologian
boring.
who said to you, if two people believe the same?
Oh yeah, if
who
two
was
people
that?
agree on everything, one of them's not necessary. So it's
Yeah.
okay to have differing opinions.
Yeah. And on a good day, that works really good with us.
Yeah.
On a bad day, I'm like, you're wrong. You are wrong. Okay.
But so
I've lost my track. Now I'm complete. I have no idea where we are.
Need to be
Okay,
moving
here we go.
along
Here we go.
So, next aspect of a communication climate, of a healthy communication climate, is trust. There needs to be trust apparent. Mahatma Gandhi said, the moment there is suspicion about a person's motives, everything he does becomes tainted.
That's right.
When you betray someone, when you break that trust, it is really hard to restore it. And you need to be sure that when you're in relationship with someone that you can trust them, that they are a person who has integrity, that they will follow through. If they say they're going to be somewhere, they are. If they're not, they call you. That helps to build trust in the relationship.
Yeah, so one of our favorite movies of all time is Cinderella Man. A totally true story about James Braddock, who pulled one of the biggest upsets in the history of professional boxing. But they went through the Depression together as a family. Severely tested their relationship. So trust is, hey, if you're going to say you're in my corner, just like a boxing match, right? You're in my corner. Do you follow through with the fact that you're in my corner, right? I can trust that you're going to be there in the good times and the hard times is what we would say is a healthy communication climate.
But the red flags in this area would be if you see that the values my significant other talks about in public are not the one he or she lives out in private.
Yeah.
That's an integrity issue. So you're, with your significant other and they're talking about, how much in front of their Bible class, how much they love the Bible, and then you see them privately and they are not living that out at all. There's an integrity issue there. And then the other red flag would be a fear that if I allow you to see my weaknesses, you will use those against me. Can I trust you to accept me as I am, as a whole person with strengths and weaknesses? Or do I feel like I need to be so guarded that if I were to expose my weaknesses to you, that you may even use those as a weapon against me?
Yeah, because that's the hard. Marriages, after 25 years of marriage, you see each other's weaknesses. Mm-hmm. You see each other's good days and bad days. And am I going to use that as a weapon against you that you don't always live up to the stated values that you have? Last is what commitment. The hallmark of commitment is the assumption that you're going to have a future together, right? That is what Christian marriage is that till death do us part, sickness and in health. And even your friendships, right? The ones that you're going to do for the rest of your life. You have an assumption that we're going to be there together. Now, that is not true of dating relationships. Dating relationships come and go, and eventually one of them may turn into this lifetime commitment, but don't think that every relationship I'm in has to have this lifelong commitment.
Yeah. And sometimes when you're in a relationship, you try to force it to work, right? You begin to see some of maybe these red flags or even yellow flags. Maybe nothing as severe as we've talked about, but they're just some things that kind of concern you, but for some reason you just force yourself to stay in there. You stick in it even when you know it's not best for you and it's not the best relationship. So we want to give you an idea of what it can look like to be committed or settle for something that's less than best. But not what you really want, right?
But we have noticed since being at Biola that this has become a huge red flag in relationships. For example, I'm committed to the idea of the relationship more than I'm committed to the actual relationship. In other words, I want to be in a relationship. Why? Because I feel good about myself. The future is kind of scary if I'm going to graduate and I don't have a lot of things nailed down, but at least I have this relationship nailed down. So I feel like there's less ambiguity. So we have seen people here at Biola and at marriage conferences who just really settle because I'd rather be in a relationship than I'd not be in one. There's a big difference between Mr. Right and Mr. Right Now. Right? A huge difference between the two. And let me say one other thing. We've noticed that I stay in an unhealthy relationship because I have this misguided view of what Christian commitment is. In other words, we've seen dating couples where, man, they talk to us like, yeah, we argue a lot, it's really hard.
We're working through it.
Yeah, and we say to them, how long have you been dating? And they're like, 3 months. You should be in the honeymoon stage at 3 months. You should not be having these, yeah, but I'm learning to love, I'm loving him unconditionally. No, you should not be loving him unconditionally. You should not be loving her unconditionally. You should be determining if you want to love this person unconditionally for the rest of your lives. And in Christian marriage, we are not advocating that there's no biblical grounds for divorce. We're not advocating that. We would say, I think the Bible does give certain grounds, and in light of this week, I would make the argument that absolutely physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse in a Christian marriage is grounds for divorce biblically. We don't have time to lay that out, but the speaker laid it out on Wednesday, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you don't work very hard for reconciliation, but that there are options. And so when you're in a dating relationship, you are not in a lifetime covenant commitment with that person. And so if there is abuse or even just severe unhealth, it is appropriate for you to get out of that.
And I would simply say if there's one instance of abuse, you get out. I don't care if you're engaged and the marriage is next weekend. One instance of verbal abuse, one instance of physical abuse. He yells at you, he pushes you against the wall, he calls you a derogatory name. I say, you're done. The wedding is called off, you're out of that relationship, and that person needs to get healthy before they enter into a relationship.
So let's just close with
a mountain.
Nope. I need to go back.
There we go. C.S. Lewis, who is a mountain. But go ahead, yes.
But that we all have a communication climate with God. So as we talk about things like trust and commitment and expectations, and I'm forgetting one. But
trust.
I said trust. So, but that God is there. That we have a relationship with God, and that it is important, as C.S. Lewis said, human beings can't make one another really happy for long. You cannot love fellow creatures until you love God. And not that you won't find joy in relationships, you do, and satisfaction and meaning. They're very important, but that it can't be the main source of your identity. And if it is, then you really do leave yourself vulnerable to entering into and staying in unhealthy relationships.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.